Before you argue with anything I'm about to say, I want you to do one thing. I want you to imagine your sister being told her life belongs to the state at 18. I want you to imagine 5,000 women dying at work every year, and nobody marching. I want you to imagine women receiving 60% longer prison sentences for the exact same crime. I want you to imagine women dying by suicide at 4 times the male rate, and it barely making headlines. If your chest tightened even slightly imagining that, good. Because today, we're going to talk about why that reaction exists. This is Mr. Eugene, and today we're running a thought experiment. Not a rant. Not a political tirade. Not an attack on women. A mirror. And I genuinely believe this experiment has more power to create understanding about the male experience than any lecture filled with statistics ever could. Because here's what I've learned after years of having these conversations. When you talk directly about male suffering, people shut down. They dismiss it. They minimize it. Or they simply don't have the emotional framework to process it. The data doesn't land. The statistics don't move them. Lived experience gets labeled as complaining. So we're not going to explain male disadvantage the traditional way. We're going to flip it. We're going to take every structural disadvantage, every normalized double standard, every area where men are treated as disposable, invisible, or unworthy of serious concern. And we're going to ask one simple question. What would happen if this were happening to women instead? Not as an act of bitterness, not as a competition, not as a way to tear anyone down, but as a genuine reflection, because sometimes the only way to make invisible suffering visible is to place it in a body society instinctively protects. And whether we like admitting it or not, our culture has made one thing very clear. Women's suffering activates urgency. Men's suffering activates explanation. So let's hold up the mirror. Before we move forward, let me set the tone clearly. This is not rage. This is not anti-woman. This is not resentment disguised as analysis. This is a calm, steady examination of double standards. So normalize that we've stopped recognizing them as double standards at all. Men experience these realities daily. They're so woven into what it means to be male that most men don't even register them as injustices anymore. They see them as the cost of admission, the entry fee for being a man. This thought experiment exists to expose that fee, to make the invisible visible, to ask a question that deserves a serious answer. If we would never tolerate these things happening to women, why do we tolerate them happening to men without hesitation? Stay with me. Let's start with something foundational. The draft. Every 18-year-old man in this country is legally required to register for selective service. Not optional. Not symbolic. Legally required. Fail to do it, and you risk losing access to federal student loans, federal employment, and you could potentially face criminal charges. Why? Because if the government needs bodies to send into combat, it needs to know where to find them. Women are not required to register. That's not an accident. That's not a clerical oversight. That's a deliberate legal distinction built on a cultural assumption so deeply embedded we barely notice it anymore. In a crisis, men's lives are available to be spent. Women's lives are not. Now pause. Reverse it. Imagine 18-year-old women being legally required to register for combat eligibility. Imagine losing federal aid for refusing. Imagine being told that if the nation needs you, your body can be directed into lethal danger. No vote, no opt-out. Think about the scale of backlash that would erupt. Supreme Court challenges within weeks. Mass protests. Emergency legislation. Wall-to-wall. Media coverage calling it the defining civil rights issue of the generation. And they would be right. Because it is an enormous thing to tell any human being. Your life can be claimed. Your body can be sent to die. You must be available. That is precisely what we tell teenage boys. And we say it so routinely that most of them barely grasp how extraordinary that demand actually is. Welcome to adulthood. Sign here to confirm that your life belongs to us if needed. If that sentence feels unthinkable when directed at young women, we need to ask why it feels normal when directed at young men. Now let's talk about dying at work. Approximately 5,000 men die in workplace accidents in this country every single year. 5,000. That's not a statistic. That's 5,000 funerals. 5,000 families shattered. 5,000 fathers, sons, husbands, brothers who left for work and never came home. These deaths cluster in industries like construction, mining, logging, fishing, agriculture, transportation, physically dangerous jobs, high-risk labor, overwhelmingly male, And somewhere in the profit equation, an acceptable level of worker death is factored in. Now flip it. Imagine 5,000 women dying annually in female-dominated industries. Imagine the headlines, the congressional hearings, the OSHA overhauls, the documentaries, the advocacy organizations forming overnight. We don't have to speculate. We've seen how society mobilizes when female safety is at risk. The response is immediate, comprehensive, moralized. When men die at work, paperwork is filed, settlements are paid, business continues. It's treated as the cost of doing certain kinds of work. The men who accept daily physical risk because someone has to, because it pays what it pays, are not framed as making extraordinary sacrifices. They're treated as expendable inputs. 5,000 funerals a year, and it barely disrupts the national dialogue. Now let's talk about lifespan. Men die approximately 5 to 6 years earlier than women on average. 5 to 6 years? That's years of watching grandchildren grow up. Years of retirement. Years of shared time that women statistically get and men do not. The causes are complex. Men take more physical risks. Men dominate dangerous industries. Men seek medical care less frequently. Men die by suicide at far higher rates. All of that contributes to a mortality gap that has persisted for generations. Now imagine the gap reversed. Imagine women dying 5 to 6 years earlier than men. Would we be calmly analyzing contributing factors? Or would we be calling it a public health emergency demanding immediate intervention and large-scale funding? We already know the answer. When female health disparities are identified, research funding follows. Public campaigns follow. Policy follows. Institutions mobilize. When men die earlier, the response tends to be, well, men make different choices. They take more risks. There are reasons. As if explanation equals justification. A disparity being explainable does not make it acceptable. We have never required female health gaps to be mysterious before treating them as urgent. We should not require that of male health gaps either. Now the legal system. Research consistently shows men receive approximately 60% longer sentences than women for equivalent crimes. Not slightly longer. Not marginally different. 60% longer for the same offense. Reverse it. Imagine women receiving sentences 60% longer than men for identical crimes. Would that survive public scrutiny? There would be investigations, task forces, legal reforms. It would be framed correctly as systemic injustice. But when the disparity disadvantages men, the research exists, the data is published, and the policy response is essentially silence. Then family court. Men who have built families over decades, who were present fathers, faithful providers, active parents walk into divorce proceedings and discover the default assumption often favors the mother as primary custodian. The burden falls on the father to prove he deserves equal time with children he helped raise. Now reverse it. Imagine mothers walking into courtrooms where fathers automatically received primary custody 80% of the time. Imagine women given weekend visitation. Imagine paying financial support to an ex-husband who moved on. There would be organized outrage by morning, and it would be justified, because that would be unjust. Yet this reality plays out for men every day, and organized resistance remains limited. Why? Because men have been conditioned to endure injustice quietly, rather than organize against it. Education. Women now attend and graduate from college at rates roughly 20 percentage points higher than men. The gap is widening. Title IX. Men who don't seek medical help. Men who internalize pain. Men who carry unbearable weight silently until they break. Imagine imposing that standard on women. Stop talking about your struggles. Emotional expression is weakness. Needing support is failure. It would be condemned immediately as harmful, and it would be correct to condemn it. Applied to men, it is no less destructive. The evidence is visible in suicide rates, mental health crises, life expectancy gaps, homelessness, isolation. Men are paying with their lives for a standard no one would tolerate if applied universally. So what does this mirror reveal? Every issue we've discussed, the draft, workplace deaths, mortality gaps, sentencing disparities, family court bias, educational decline, suicide, homelessness, violence victimization, media caricature, the man-up doctrine. Every one of them would generate immediate, organized response if women were disproportionately affected. We know this because we've seen it happen, and the mobilization for women has been necessary and justified. But equivalent or worse disparities affecting men persist with minimal response. Not because the suffering is smaller, not because the scale is trivial, but because male suffering exists outside the frameworks through which society recognizes injustice. Men do not organize effectively on their own behalf. They have been taught that doing so signals weakness. So the problems grow, and the silence continues. This needs to change, not through hostility, not through diminishing women's progress, but through recognizing that male suffering is real, significant, and worthy of serious attention. If we can see how we would respond when these realities affect women, we should be able to respond when they affect men. The standard of compassion should not shift with gender. Let me close clearly. This is not about attacking women. Women's issues matter. Female suffering is real and deserves the response it receives. But so does male suffering. And if our commitment to reducing human suffering is genuine, it must extend equally. Right now, by that measure, men are being failed, consistently, across nearly every domain where they are disadvantaged. This thought experiment is not about subtraction. It is about extension. Extending to men the same humanity already extended to women. Asking the same urgent questions. Mobilizing even a fraction of the same social energy. That should not be controversial. But given how rarely these conversations occur in mainstream discourse, it remains necessary. Tell me where this landed for you. What resonated? What you would add? Because this conversation matters. And this channel will continue having the conversations others avoid, without softening them to make them comfortable. Men's lives matter exactly as much, exactly as deeply, exactly as undeniably as any other lives.